Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you all are. I would like to welcome you to the first webinar of 2021 in our series on biodiversity advocacy as part of our local and subnational government information webinar series, which is actually the 20th one in the series already. And we're very, very happy this year to kick 2021 off with a really, I think, very pertinent focus. And we're focusing on the youth and the youth perspective. At the start of a new year, when it's still a young year, we thought it would be very relevant to hear from our youth what their aspirations and hopes and ideals are for biodiversity and nature in this year of 2021. So what we're going to be doing today is just to focus on, as I said, the youth. And I want to just recognize the various our partners and specifically also recognize the fact that these webinars are possible through the very generous support of the post-2020 biodiversity framework EU support. And then also that we have under the global task force of local and regional governments, ICLEI is one of the members, and you can see up on the slide the very many other members as well. So the webinar today, you can see there, this is the schedule of dates. They are available, the forthcoming dates are available also, and the links on our website, and you see the website link in your slide to the right there as well. And we repeat the same webinar twice a day, 10 and 3 p.m. for purposes of different time zones. And what I would just like to mention at this point is to go through the program quickly. So we have quite a full program following this introduction. We're going to have an update on the COP15 roadmap and some news about past and future events. And then, as I said, we're going to feature on the youth aspirations, which is brought to us by the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. And then we will end today's webinar with some questions and answers. So I'm going to ask the participants, if you have questions or you would like to make some comments, please use the question and answer box, which you will find on your screens. You can post it in there. We keep an eye on those, and at the end of the webinar, we will deal with all of those. You will note that your speakers and your videos are off. And then just to say also that we are recording these webinars, and through your participation, we accept that you give consent to be recorded. And the reason we do this is because we share it and we put it up on our YouTube afterwards. So everybody that attends this webinar will get that link, but it is also available more widely. And then without further ado, I would like to ask my two speakers today from the GYBN, please to just put on their videos. And we have Christian Schwarzer, who is the co-founder of GYBN. And then he's joined also by Josefa Tauli, and she is on the steering committee, an Indigenous youth representative. And then myself, my name is Ingrid Kutsia. I am the Director of Biodiversity, Nature and Health at ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center, and also ICLEI Africa, and I'm based here in Cape Town. So without further ado, because we have a full program, I'm going to move to just a quick update on the roadmap. It's a big year for us, for nature again. You can see it is already at this early stage, you can see all those dots. It's a very full year, and I'm going to be talking about some of these past events that happened earlier this year and towards the end of last year, and then we will move on to the rest of the program. So just quickly, if we look back, we didn't have a webinar in December, and there was an important milestone event in the post-2020 roadmap, and this was a special virtual session for SABSTA and SBI on biodiversity, One Health and COVID-19, which took place in the middle of December. I'm not going to give much detail about it. It was a really interesting and very important session. There were some very good statements made and good messages. There are the links on the screen. We will share them with you in the chat box. And then also just to say that ICLEI and its network partners, which are Regions for, the European Committee of Regions, the group of leading subnational governments towards the IT biodiversity targets, and the Advisory Committee on Subnational Governments attended these sessions, and we made a joint statement. And if you want to read the statement, please feel free. There is the link. It's on the advocacy website as well. And then this year kicked off really with a major highlight, and that was the One Planet Summit for Biodiversity. This event was organized by France, the United Nations, and the World Bank. And the whole thing about the event was to mobilize commitments. Now, you can understand that as a result of the delays caused by COVID and the fact that we keep having to put off the negotiations and the COP, one of the difficult things has been to maintain momentum. So events like the One Planet Summit and many of the others that are planned for this year are really critical in maintaining this momentum towards COP15. And I just want to make one point here. It was really a very striking comment that was made by the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, in his address, where he said, 2021 must be the year that we reconcile with nature. And it was a very emotional and heartfelt statement that he made. And I think that this is absolutely critical and in a sense is almost the mantra for the year going forward. And another highlight, of course, was the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People that was launched by the governments of France and Costa Rica. And you can see there are the links. I would really advise you to go and have a look. The bottom link is the web TV of the United Nations, and you can go back and listen into all of these various summit discussions and events. And then there were, and they've just recently stopped, throughout the month of January and early this month, there were a series of virtual briefing webinars around the different agenda items for SABSTA and SPI. The first was on the 19th of January, and that focused more on the post-2020 global biodiversity process. And then a few days later, on the 21st, it was around enhancing reporting and review mechanisms to strengthen the implementation of the convention. On the 26th, there was one about specifically the scientific and technical information that is needed to review the updated goals and targets and baseline indicators, etc. And you'll see there on the slide the links to each of those webinars. And again, you can listen in on YouTube. And then the fourth webinar actually was done in two parts. The last one happened to be this week on the 2nd, and the first one was towards the end of last week. And this was around very technical things around synthetic biology, risk assessment and management, marine and coastal biodiversity, biodiversity in agriculture, the IPBES work program, biodiversity in health, invasive alien species. So all again, very important and topical questions. Unfortunately, the 2nd of Feb webinar is not yet uploaded onto YouTube, but we will, by the time we send out our link to our webinar, it will be provided and we will include it then as well. Now, just quickly to look at some of the forthcoming events, there's a couple, I think certainly the important ones. Although SABSTA, which is the technical meeting, and SPI, which is the implementation meeting, has been postponed, they are having informal sessions in preparation for both of these meetings. These will take place for SABSTA this month still, and you have the dates on the screen there. And then the SPI meetings will be held later in March. Now, these are really important and in the sense that a lot of the discussion, although these are not negotiation meetings, a lot of the discussions will be in preparation for those actual meetings. And again, ICLEI and its network partners that I mentioned earlier will be attending, and we are, as we speak, we are working on making joint submissions to represent our constituency of local and national, subnational governments, to make sure that our voice is heard in these platforms and taken into consideration. And then, of course, there's the Nature of Cities, or the TNOC Festival, a very exciting virtual event. It's going to be held towards the end of this month. And there's a range of different and very innovative, some even provocative sessions and dialogues. There's going to be a pavilion. And I understand from our colleagues that work on the post-2020 biodiversity framework EU support, that they are going to have an exhibition there, and we will also be participating. And we have definitely wanting to do also a session on an important topic for the implementation of the new framework, and that relates to how do we finance nature work and ecosystem restoration and nature-based solutions in an urban context going forward. So that's hopefully something that will come off as well. And at this point, I'm just going to ask my friend Christian, and we're going to move across. I will stop sharing because it is the turn of the youth now to take over. So we're in very able hands, and I will move on to you. Thank you. Christian, if you can just unmute yourself, there you are.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ingrid. And thank you so much for the invitation to join you guys today in this webinar. We're really grateful for everybody that is taking time for that. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you. I think Ingrid already said it. We really hope that after all what happened in 2020 to 2021 is finally going to be the real super year for biodiversity. But we have to see how this is all going to go. We will have to keep pushing. We have to remind politicians that while we have to tackle the COVID crisis, we cannot forget about what has caused it. And that is our relationship with nature that we have to reconcile with. And that's what our presentation is focused on. My name is Christian. I'm from Germany. I'm the co-founder of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Josefa Tauli from the Philippines. She's part of the Gibbon Steering Committee and represents indigenous youth. And we will give you an overview of our network and what we have planned for 2021. So first slide, please. Wonderful. Just starting a little bit what the Global Youth Biodiversity Network is. We are an entirely youth-led movement of young people from all over the world, and we are the coordination platform for youth participation in the Convention on Biological Diversity. Next slide. This is where we're currently standing. We have celebrated our 10th anniversary last year. We started with a small group of young people that met at a conference in Japan that was really fed up of, about the way we were doing things. We were just 5 people, and now we're representing more than 1.2 million youth in 172 countries. We also have chapters that are active on the ground, 40 chapters at the moment. So we're quite happy how much this network has grown. Next slide, please. And this is a little bit what we're doing. We're focusing, among others, on policy and advocacy work. I already mentioned it at the beginning. We're bringing young people to the CBD. We provide scholarship opportunities to join CBD meetings when they take place in person. But policy in the CBD is not just limited to the actual meetings. It's also a lot of what is happening in between. So we organize all sort of trainings. We develop positions. We bring youth from all walks of life together to really understand the CBD process. Next slide. But we always felt that just bringing young people to these international conferences is not what is going to change the status of biodiversity. So we always felt that we also need to do something more. So we're organizing a lot of capacity building, but especially empowerment sessions, because we think that young people really have this energy in them. They have everything that it takes for them to create positive change. But we need to empower them. We need to show them that they can live up to their potential. And because of that, we're organizing capacity building workshops. We organize toolkits, webinars. We have developed publications. And next slide. So a lot of our work is focused on mobilizing young people, on organizing outreach. We always organize big campaigns for the International Day for Biological Diversity. So have a look out for what we have in store for this year. And I hope maybe that some of you can join our activities. Next slide. What is very important for us, we think that one organization, one network alone cannot help to prevent the loss of biodiversity. We need to join forces. We need to work together. So this is really the heart of our network. We're very much focused on alliance building with all kind of actors. We want to bring different youth organizations, from the scouts to medical students, to young biologists that are working on the ground, to indigenous youth, to members of the LGBTQ community. We want to bring them all together, and we want to form a big movement. So alliance building is really important for us. Next slide. Publications. We also think that it's really key that we inform young people about the CBD process, how they can get active, how it is being implemented on the national, but also on the local level. So our flagship publication is CBD in a Nutshell, a guidebook to the CBD process that we first released in 2016. And we actually just wrote it for ourselves because someday we found ourselves sitting down wondering, all right, what are we actually doing in these international negotiations? How does this actually work? Does anybody even understand this? So we spent quite some time researching it, trying to put together all this information. And while we developed it as a youth publication, it is now actually being used by all kinds of newcomers to the CBD process, by focal points, by new party delegates. It's a publication from the youth, but for everybody. And it has been quite successful. We have had a number of downloads. We have distributed a lot of copies. So if you have a chance, please take a look on our website, gybn.org/publications, and download it. Next slide. I mentioned, we think that we cannot only save biodiversity at international conferences. This is something that we need to do in our homes, in our backyards, in our communities. This is something that we can do everywhere and every day. Because we feel that in order to create this change, we need young change makers to be empowered. We're organizing capacity building workshops. So far, we have organized 8 of them. And we hope that once COVID is over, we can continue with organizing these workshops. They're usually 1-week events, and it's not the kind of workshop where you can just come, where you have a good time, where you can relax. You're also going to have a good time, but you have to work. It's a workshop where we develop concrete projects, where we look into the drivers of biodiversity loss for the specific region, and then really look into ways how we can tackle it. Next slide, please. And this is something that Sefa and I are massively proud of. Over all these years, we have managed to create over 40 chapters that are helping us to spread our mission from the global level to the ground. So they're almost everywhere in all world regions. So have a look on our website, and you're more than welcome to join our chapters. Next slide. And here we'd like to hand over to Sefa, who will give us a little bit of an introduction to the super year. Sefa, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. Yes, and so in the context, right, of the biodiversity super years, I guess now, we're really excited to share with you today the roadmap that we have for youth engagement that we have been working on since last year, and that we're really hoping will continue to build as we move towards COP15. So essentially, the given youth engagement roadmap really aims to empower and mobilize young people to get active and to push for their voices and priorities so that they are taken into account into these biodiversity-related decision-making processes. And so some of the key things that we've been doing in this roadmap is capacity building, consultations, advocacy, actions, and then throughout the roadmap, we've been reaching out to our partners and many other actors who can support our work. And so essentially what we're trying to do is to gather many of these messages of youth priorities for biodiversity and for the future that we want. We hope to advocate these strong messages through social media, through the CBD processes and other places. We hope to bring everyone so that we can build a strong movement. And of course, very important is that we transform all of these things into action on the ground and implement these priorities. And so I'm really excited to share with you the amazing and really exciting stuff that we've been hard at work for in the past year or so. So one of these things is the online capacity building workshops on biodiversity and CBD that we held last September and November, which is really exciting for us. I think this is the first time that we had an online capacity building workshop of this scale, and it was something that was really successful and we got a lot of really good feedback. So we managed to reach 400 young people through Zoom and through through 2 weekends, and everyone was like really engaged and learned a lot about CBD and also the post 2020 process. Aside from this, we've developed a survey, global youth survey on the post 2020 framework to gather a lot of diverse youth views and perspectives on the framework. So we were also, through our amazing like chapters, we were able to make this available in English, Spanish, French, Arabic, Japanese, Thai, and Bahasa Indonesia. And yes, we're hoping to collect these voices and channel them into our advocacy and actions. Okay, so this is another publication that we've been working on, and it's the Given Consultation to Action Toolkit, which is essentially a guide for our chapters and other youth organizations on how to organize their own consultations around the CBD and around the post-2020 framework, and not just consult, but also how they can reach their decision makers and communicate these effectively to the public. So this is available in English, Spanish, and French. And another thing is national youth consultations, which before the pandemic, we had been able to carry these out in person. But post-pandemic, Christian will will share a bit more about the exciting virtual events planned on this later on. And one more thing is that we have been building a movement for transformative education. So this is essentially stemming from the fact that through our consultations throughout the years, transformative education and transforming the education systems has been a priority for young people in terms of achieving, the long-term vision of living in harmony with nature. So far, we've developed a policy brief which has the youth perspective on this topic. And also a few days ago, we organized a global youth consultation wherein we really gathered what young people think of the current education system and how it can be better and what they want to see for education and its relation to biodiversity. The results were really inspiring, and you can find this on our website also, or we'll make it available on our website soon. Christian?
Wonderful. Yeah, this is another initiative that we're part of, the Youth Manifesto and Open Letter that are part of the For Nature campaign, together with our partners from Yango, the youth constituency for the UNFCCC, UNEP MGCY, the youth constituency for UNEP, Youth for Our Planet, Yunga, UNDP, and UNEP. We have launched a manifesto that summarizes our views on the planetary crisis that we're in, and it calls leaders to take action. And we're currently pushing this youth manifesto to make sure that more organizations rally behind it. And we're currently working on a process to transform this youth manifesto into a concrete action agenda to make sure that we do not just like create global demands, but also turn them into concrete actions that we can take at home.
Thanks, Christian. And of course, we throughout the post-2020 global biodiversity framework processes within the CBD, like consultations and the intersessional meetings, we've been actively participating. We're advocating on the basis of our given position paper, which is the product of consultations that we've been carrying out since 2017 through our workshops and consultation events. And yeah, this is something that we're continuing to build on as we continue to gather even more youth voices. And yes, so we've basically been prioritizing a few things like the integrity of our life support system, ensuring that um, that society lives sustainably, equity for nature and people, intergenerational equity, and the full and effective participation of young people, transformative education, as I mentioned, and also human rights and the rights of nature. So these are a few of our advocacy priorities, and of course, our we have been continuing to push for a framework that really addresses the root causes of biodiversity loss, and yes, that in a framework that really pushes for the real transformative change that we need. So these are the things that we've been doing so far, and I'll pass it back to Christian to explain the things that are coming up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sefa, for this great overview. Next slide, please. Yeah, we have a number of things in store for this year. We absolutely want to make sure that 2020 finally is going to deliver and be the super year. We're going to kick this off with a number of national youth consultations. You can see an overview here. It's going to start with Paraguay just next week. Nepal is going to follow Haiti. We have Uganda, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Congo, Madagascar, Kenya, all coming up as well. Europe is going to do one in February 20th. All the flyers, all the further information on the events will be available very shortly. We will make it available on our website. We will post about it on social media. And these national youth consultations are open to everyone. So if you're a young person, if you're between 18 and 35, you care about biodiversity and you want governments to take concrete actions, but you also want people to be part of the solution, then join our national youth consultations in the countries that are listed over there. These are virtual events, so it's really open to everyone. Next slide. And of course, while we don't know when exactly the CBD will finally continue with their negotiations, either in person or virtually, we will be part of it. We want to make sure that young people, that future generations have a voice in this process, and that we do not just get solutions from yesterday, but solutions that are fit for the future. So there will be a number of virtual sessions starting quite soon. Ingrid gave an overview about this. We are organizing youth participation in these virtual sessions, and we're also gearing up to make sure that as soon as we have in-person negotiations again, we will be there and we will be watching. Next slide, please. And also this is another invitation if you now have heard about the CBD and if you're still wondering, okay, what the heck is this all about? How can I get involved? How does this affect us? We are going to organize a policy training. It will be taking place from February 13th to 15th. We just launched a flyer. It's available on our social media. Just check it out. There is a registration link open to everybody, and you can join us, and we will share with you how the CBD works, how you can get engaged, and how you can become a policy leader. Next slide. And then, of course, we did a wonderful consultation event on transformative education, but it just can't stop there. We also want to discuss this with members of other generations. So we're going to organize some intergenerational dialogues. We don't have the dates yet confirmed, but this is something where we want to talk to teachers, to decision makers, and really discuss with them what are the perspectives of young people on our education system. What is holding us back from changing this right now, and how can we make sure that it does change in the future? Next slide. And finally, we're partnering up with IUCN. IUCN will be organizing not only the World Conservation Congress, which will hopefully take place in person in September in Marseille, but they are also prioritizing the importance of youth in IUCN, not just in the World Conservation Congress, but they want to go beyond. And as part of that, there will be a Global Youth Summit taking place virtually from the 5th to 16th of April. As Gibbon, we are fortunate enough to co-organize this. There will be a number of exciting sessions on all kinds of topics: oceans, people, governance, climate change, and of course, nature. So more information on this will be available quite soon. Again, it's a free event, it's open for everybody, and we would be very happy if some of you would join IUCN's Global Youth Summit. Next slide. And that's it. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Wow. This is absolutely incredible. And listening to you, Christian and Josefa, I mean, Gibbon and ICLEI, particularly the ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center, we've long been friends certainly in the CBD process, and we are looking towards how we can strengthen that friendship and the partnership more concretely. But this is, I feel a little bit like a child in a sweet shop. I'm not quite sure where to choose and what to sort of focus on. This is really very impressive, and I just want to congratulate you. You know, I always think that, I mean, somebody like myself, I've been in this business for probably 2 decades older than what you are, you young people. But I think that there's so much that we can learn, and certainly the leaders of today can learn from young people. And that's why the voice of the youth is important. So there are quite a few questions. We'll see how we can go. We fortunately do have quite a long time, and we went through this. It was really like a whistle-stop tour of everything that you've planned. So certainly, I think we've got time now just to elaborate a little bit more. I'm going to just ask a question. I'm going to be a bit selfish, and I'm going to ask my own question here first. Listening to you and knowing what you do and the impact that you have certainly on the global scene and in global platforms and agendas, I was just wondering what would your advice be around how cities can, on the one hand, engage better with the young people, the youth in their cities when it comes to shaping policies and setting targets and things like that. But then on the other hand, also to encourage the youth in their cities to participate in urban matters more sort of proactively. And I realize that this is obviously a bit of a loaded question because situations differ. What works in Europe is not necessarily going to work in the Philippines or in Africa. And there's a number of very many dynamics, things like poverty, levels of education. That's why I'm very happy to see that you have this education drive, issues of access, issues of democracy, transparency, all of those. But given all those complexities, what would your advice be if you were, let's say I was the mayor of a particular city and you met me at some other function? That's the one question. And then the other question is, I would like to put it back to you and say, from looking back, and if I was the mayor, I would like to know, so what can Gibbon bring to cities within the sort of global space around, and I mean, it's incredible, you know, you deal with nature, but you deal with a whole range of other things as well. So I'm happy if you deal with that generically. And I think particularly in these times of COVID and this ongoing pandemic, and it's not ending, and seems to be no end in sight. And I see people like I've just forgotten his name, but anyway, they're predicting that, you know, the next pandemic is behind, you know, it's on its way too. So we shouldn't think that once COVID is gone, this is the end of it. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid, for these very warm words. Well, I wish you could be the mayor of any big city. That would be very helpful if we could include like a new criterion for mayors to be more conscious about the environment, because the reality, there are many cities, there is a tremendous number of cities where urban biodiversity, where urban action on the environment are really being prioritized, but there's obviously more to do. Well, I think the key is let young people participate, and don't just let them participate in a specific youth corner. Don't just create a youth council. We need youth councils. This is very important, but we also need young people to be participating as equals. So give young people opportunities to take part in decision making, make them feel that they are part of the decision and that they can really change something. It's all about empowerment, but especially in the global south, young people are in the majority. And if we don't utilize this giant potential in urban areas, then it's going to be a waste. So participation is an absolute key for that. But participation is not everything. Second, we also need resources for young people. If you just give young people a seat, but then they have no say, they have no resources that they can use, then it's just tokenism. So young people should also be trusted, should have budgets that they can work with and create their own projects. We have to make sure that young people feel as part of society, that they feel empowered, and that they feel that they can make a difference. And my last point is link it up with education. In my city, we had a lot of things on nature. We had a nature center where you could go out, but the problem was it was not really linked up to the education system. You had to do it voluntarily in your leisure hours, and that's good. I took advantage of it. But if we have such facilities in a city, then make it mandatory for students to go there to learn about nature. Make it mandatory in all schools. That biodiversity is not just an optional subject, but mainstreamed into all subjects, that we're learning about nature in regards to economics, in regards to mathematics, in regards to social issues, in regards to physics. We have to fully understand why nature is important, and then we have to take action. I think participation, engaging young people into intergenerational dialogues, and changing the education system. This is something where cities can create a lot of change. But, and that's my last point, we also have to recognize that there are massive differences between the global north and the global south. Yes, we have to overcome these. Yes, we need more dialogue, but we also need to recognize that what works here in Germany may not work in the Philippines, may not work in Bolivia. And we have to really recognize that these are injustices that are systemic and that we have to overcome. And maybe, Sefa, you would like to offer a perspective from the Philippines, how you think it could work in your context, because I think when we're talking about all the democratic participation mechanisms that I mentioned that might work in Europe, I think in the Philippines, it might be a little bit different.
I'd like to hear, thanks, Christian. I'd like to hear what Josefa has to say, particularly also the angle of the indigenous people, because that brings a whole new dynamic to it. So yes, please go ahead, Josefa.
Yeah, thanks, Christian, for answering that really well. I just wanted to first add that even though as given we do a lot of things at the international level and at the national level, a lot of young people find it really meaningful to affect the place where they're immediately in, and this often means their cities and their provinces, and it's also this kind of thing where you can contextualize your actions are also just really important in terms also of action for biodiversity. In the Philippines, that is the case actually, wherein it is sometimes easier to reach your city government and your local government, and to dialogue with those decision makers. And so these decision makers really have to listen to their young people who really would have a lot of meaningful things to contribute in terms of city policies, for example, and exactly like in terms of local education systems, things like this. In terms of for indigenous youth, this is actually a very interesting topic, because as we know, in many countries like the Philippines, many indigenous youth are having to migrate to cities. And this is caused by a lot of factors like economic need, for example, or um, unsafe conditions in our own home lands or our ancestral lands. This would mean that a lot of things are being affected, such as the ability to have education in your mother tongue, for example, right? And these are the things that would kind of need to be addressed um, when in cities, and how they can ensure basically that they don't contribute to the loss of cultural diversity, um, which also, of course, affects biodiversity. So maybe that I'll still just stop there.
You raise some very pertinent and important issues, both of you actually. And the one thing that I was just thinking about, just in terms of my own continent, the African context, one of the things that Africans feel the most or the greatest need for is to move beyond dialogue and actually get to action, because the needs on the ground and the inequalities and that gap is so large that many of the mayors and many of the people in the cities where we have projects, for example, they'll say we don't want to talk anymore. We've talked enough. We need water. We need, and never mind water, we need clean water, or we need jobs, or we need to stop this harvesting of the forest, because our own sort of cultural ways and the dependency that we had on nature is being ruined, and that's leading to all kinds of social problems. You talked about migrating to the cities, but there's huge social issues as well, because the social structures and compacts break down, and then you get all kinds of other problems. So these are really very tricky things, and I think that nature, and if there's one good thing that came out of COVID, it's shown us how important nature and family or community, the relationships that we have with each other and our relationship with nature is, and that we've forgotten this in our very materialistic world, where we sort of keep trying to make more money or do more things, and and I think that that's hopefully a lesson that the world has learned, and I have a lot of confidence in the youth to keep reminding us of that important lesson. And you talked about intergenerational equity and things like that. I think that that's definitely a very important thing, and certainly something that we need to work a little harder on. There was something else that has come up. You mentioned a lot of things. You talked about different toolkits. You talked about the youth manifesto, and the given position papers. So something that has come up as a question is how on the youth manifesto, how does that work? Obviously it'll have certain messages, but if there's a city that has a young mayor or a very strong youth program, is there a way in which they support it or endorse it? Or is this for individuals to sign? So if you could maybe just elaborate on that youth manifesto a little bit, please.
Of course. Thank you so much for this question. Really happy to hear that there is so much interest. Yes, the Youth Manifesto was launched last year during the UN Biodiversity Summit. It is actually something that we as Gibbon have not created alone, but together with a number of other partners that I mentioned before. And everybody can sign on to it. It is hosted by the UN Major Group for Children and Youth, which is the umbrella for all youth organizations that are active in the UN system. And on the unmjcy.org website, you can check it out. You can sign it both as an individual, but also as an organization, as a mayor, as a city, and you can become part of it. At the moment, it's just like a number of demands that young people have put forward to world leaders. But as I mentioned, we are going to organize a number of youth leadership dialogues, but we want to discuss how we're turning this into actions. What are concrete steps that we can take to bring all of these demands that we put into the Youth Manifesto to life? And urban areas are absolute key for that. We could absolutely do something specifically with urban areas to review this. So maybe Ingrid, that's something that we can do as a next project. Let's do a youth dialogue together on the Youth Manifesto, focused on urban areas. We bring our community together. You guys can bring some mayors, and then we can discuss how can we make this work and what is maybe more difficult to implement in urban areas. What do you think about this, Ingrid?
I like that. I definitely like that
Great.
idea. I just want to see that and that's a good challenge for us. And just to tell everybody, there is the link. Thanks, Josefa. She's just put it up, the link and to both the manifesto and the open letter. So that is a good challenge, and we'll certainly get together after this, Christian, and we can start working around a program.
Yay,
and I want to
looking
start
forward to that.
to start wrapping up. So I'm just going to again, for me, just if I can give you both sort of a quick question. What would the one single thing be that you think we need to achieve this year in order to, in the point that Antonio Guterres made at the One Planet Summit, where we said we need to reconcile people and nature. This needs to be the year to do that. What would your big thing be? What would you like to see happen in that respect? And let's start with Josefa and then Christian, and then I'll wrap up at the end.
The one big thing, one thing that we have been always advocating for is really to push for an equitable and just world, which is necessary really for achieving a sustainable world. And so one very important thing that to not forget while we, forward these goals and targets for biodiversity is that a global framework that defines action for the world to address biodiversity loss should always put forward the well-being of people and the rights of people and the respect for the rights of indigenous peoples. And so maybe that's the one big thing that I'll give.
Christian, yourself. Thanks, Josefa.
I think Sefa mentioned the most important thing. We should not forget that this is not just about biodiversity, but that we as people are part of biodiversity. And often when we talk about biodiversity here in Europe, we're imagining pristine landscapes that are empty, that we just leave to nature. What Sefa just emphasized is that in many, many parts of the world, people are part of this. This needs to be recognized. And especially when we think about the COVID crisis, how could we get a stronger reminder of how important our relationship with nature is? So what I really wish for is that we take some lessons from the COVID crisis. Just yesterday, I heard in the news, we managed to produce a vaccine that would normally take 10 years to create in 10 months. 10 months. So if we as humanity really want to do something, if we join forces, if we do not just focus on our interest to create maximum profit, if we collaborate as one humanity in both the North and the South, we can make leaps that otherwise would be unfathomable. And I want the same spirit for biodiversity. What I'm most concerned about is now that we're focusing so much on the COVID crisis, some of the governments here in the North are able to provide financial support to the economy. In the South, the situation is completely different. But what I'm most afraid of is that by the time we can proceed with the CBD process, with the in-person negotiations, governments will have run out of money. So what I want from governments is that they make concrete commitments, that we create a global fund for biodiversity protection that is independent from climate financing. Biodiversity is not a commodity, it's not just carbon benefits, it is something that we have to save for its own sake, for our sake as humanity. And what I want to see this year is concrete commitments from governments that they're going to continue protecting biodiversity regardless of how the financial status is after the end of the COVID crisis, and that we use the same spirit that we have used to develop a vaccine to tackle the loss of biodiversity for ourselves, for future generations, for humankind, no matter if we live in the North and the South. This is the spirit that we need, and I hope that countries will come forward with that. And
Thank you so much.
The young people are here to support them, of course.
Yeah, thank you so much, and you've said it very well. There's just been, I think, stimulated by Josefa, just one last question, and this relates to the issue of the rights of ethnic minorities in your country. So just quickly, I'm not going to read the whole thing because we're running out of time, but just quickly, recognizing the important role of indigenous peoples in the conservation and protection of protected areas in the Philippines. What efforts and policies are being developed or undertaken at the national, and specifically let's focus for you on the international levels that could strengthen and support the important role of indigenous people. So just very briefly, if you can focus on that, thanks.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And definitely the situation here for indigenous peoples has been very difficult, wherein indigenous peoples are facing a lot of criminalization by the government for the work that they do, which is, of course, like safeguarding their rights to land and to life. And so maybe the one important thing that I will mention is that, for example, at the international level with the CBD post-2020 framework, it's very important that there are policies and actions made to ensure that environmental defenders are really able to work in a safe and enabling environment. This is also very important at the national level. And also, of course, that indigenous people's rights to land and to their resources, and to govern these lands and resources on their own terms, without facing the threat and harassment that they often face all over the world. This should be something that should be prioritized at all levels, not just at the international level, but also at the national and local levels. And this is something that indigenous peoples worldwide have been forwarding for decades now at the international level, and that should continue to be advanced and is being advanced by indigenous activists at the national level also.
Yeah. And I think within the CBD process, I can't speak for the others, but quite successfully also. I think at least their voices are heard there. They get a lot of speaking opportunities. Okay, I'm going to, Trisha, can you move to the next slide just to save a bit of time? Thank you. And then just to say thank you to Christian and Josefa. This is, Patricia, just one slide up, please. This has been really a great interactive discussion and webinar, and I certainly look forward to closer collaboration with your organization going forward. And just to quickly remind people, just to say that Cities with Nature is a platform that we put out there for cities to connect and share. And one of the things, Christian, that we should continue our discussion is how can we make closer linkages between your platform and ours. For example, we have a resources and tools modality that we're busy developing, and I just looked at some of those things that you had shown in your presentation and thinking those are exactly the sorts of things that we would like to include here. Whether we upload it or we make a link to your platform is something else. So for those of you that are in the audience that are new to this webinar series, please go and have a look at our Cities with Nature website. Just bear in mind when you engage with it, only cities that are signed up to Cities with Nature can get into the deeper levels of the website and the sort of actual nature pathway. But there is a lot on the sort of open interface that you can see. And if you can take me to the last slide, what I just want to say again is to thank my two speakers. This is such an exciting way to start the year, giving us new energy, some lovely young ideas, and some great wisdom actually coming from you young people. And then just to say that from ICLEI, we also have some exciting things planned for this year. I'm not going to give you much detail because we will have some webinars about this later in the year. For one, we talked a lot about COVID now today in our webinar, and ICLEI decided towards the end of last year that it is going to be establishing a One Health Center on a global program, very much like the city's Biodiversity Center. Obviously, it's a far more encompassing type of program, and well, we're working on this, so just this is watch this spot. We will certainly provide more information about that later in the year. And then another one that's very exciting is the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. In fact, the UN Decade of Action, also very exciting this year. But on the biodiversity side, the ecosystem restoration, we are planning a great program, and we certainly intend involving the youth in that program as well. So watch the spot. We will certainly bring some more information. And with that, I think we've almost reached the end. So thank you again to my speakers, to all of the participants. We've got another webinar this afternoon. And for those of you that have participated and registered for this webinar, we will certainly be sharing the recordings, and just give us, it normally takes a few days or so. Thank you so much, and goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your day or your evening. Bye-bye.